Hello, I'm Robert Pratten. I'm CEO of Conductor, and our mission is to make everyone's life an adventure. And that's because we believe through adventure, everyone can achieve their full potential in life. Now, what we sell is software for you to create and run your own crisis exercises. So in this session, I'm going to discuss exercising in the cognitive domain, the war of words. And what I'm going to explain is the importance of preparing for a defense against digital activism and how to design exercises for it. I don't know if you're familiar with that phrase bluff, bottom line up front, but here are the three key takeaways. Number one, risk mitigation requires an understanding of the narratives that impact your organisation. Two, understanding the factions that propagate adverse narratives will help you prepare to counter them. And three, information domain risks will become real-world threats if they're left unchecked. And what I mean by this is you can't just consider reputational risks to be purely kind of information risks. They will become operational risks if activists blockade your mine or close your store or attack your lorries or something. So how big an issue is it? Well, we released a study in April this year that presented original research we conducted into what communications managers considered their most significant challenges. And what we found was that after cyber attacks, there were three big new threats: employee activism, cancel culture, and disinformation. 77% agree that their brand is at risk from activists and conspiracy theorists. 83% are least confident in fighting disinformation, and in fact 31% say that new threats from disinformation are the top challenge. In this presentation, I'm going to use an example of a disinformation attack on a bank which causes a silent bank run. How do we design a scenario for this type of disinformation threat, or indeed any reputational threat? Well, we need to approach the exercise slightly differently. So let's take a step back. All stories, whether it's a novel or a movie, take place in a story world. And if you're thinking of James Bond, his story world is full of glamorous people, exotic locations, casinos, martinis, and even though each movie in the sort of James Bond franchise has its own plot, they all exist in this distinctive world. And usually when we design an exercise, whether it's business continuity or crisis, we don't really consider the world that much. It's kind of taken for granted if it's a knife attack or an earthquake or a tsunami, because all those things happen in the physical domain. But if it's a reputational exercise or a counter-terrorism exercise, anything where we're talking about narratives and messaging, we do need to consider the world. This diagram shows how the world and the master events list are related. And in our work for defence and security, we'd call this sort of world the information environment or the human terrain. And it's important to know what factions have an impact on our ability to go about our business. Like, what are their opinions, what's their messaging, what are their beliefs, their narratives. And the place we start to consider this first is in what we call fault lines, and they're the themes and topics that are used to divide communities, or in the case of a business, that can really impact us. So takeaway one, risk mitigation requires an understanding of the narratives that impact your organisation. We use these iceberg diagrams to discuss and agree the narratives that affect us. What's above the water are the narratives directly related to the scenario, and what's below the water are kind of the deep-seated, long-term, long-running narratives that threaten us. And it doesn't matter if they're old or if they're fake, they're there as a vulnerability. And any strategic communications planning ought to already be working on defensive lines to take should these things ever pop up. So let's look at an example. Behind me is the scenario canvas, and it's for a reputational risk exercise that creates a silent bank run. Now, in a normal bank run, bank customers line up outside the sort of cash machines or the ATM to take money out. And because of herd mentality, if we see a line of people withdrawing cash, we're likely to think, we should be doing the same. In a silent bank run, customers transfer their money out of the bank and into another bank or somewhere else. And in this scenario, we're trying to get them to transfer their money from the banks into cryptocurrencies. So what's the scenario? Well, the inciting incident is a disgruntled employee publishes a forged letter saying it's from the CFO into a Reddit forum, claiming that the bank has increasing liquidity problems, and this has been created because of large withdrawals from private and business customers putting their money into cryptocurrency. The letter argues that the bank needs to offer its own cryptocurrency because cash is dead, and all of this has started after a meeting of business leaders with the Prime Minister, where he's told them that they're going to send he's going to send interest rates negative to try to get people to spend money, and they're going to put money into cryptocurrency, and they're going to find sort of some incentives to help retail customers move away from cash. So in this scenario, we've managed to capture disinformation, conspiracy, and employee activism. So the best disinformation will take facts and twist them or repurpose them. So we're going to use a meeting of these business leaders with the Prime Minister as our main sort of kick-off point for the conspiracy. And we'll also have previous discussions about negative interest rates and cryptocurrency hype that's been sort of published even in sort of like business journals or in sort of like national national newspapers like the FT or something. And all of these different points of reference will be stitched together into our disinformation campaign. So takeaway 2, understanding the factions that propagate adverse narratives will help us prepare to counter them. So now we need to look at our stakeholders, and because this is a disinformation exercise, we need to break down the public into different factions. So our factions in this case will be like crypto advocates, eco warriors, libertarian conspiracists, and so on. And these are developed around what they're saying and what they believe. Remember, what we're looking for is fertile ground to sow our message and then to see it grow. And as an adversary, we probably want to launder our information through several websites before it comes to light, because we don't want it to be traced back to us. So what we're looking for is other people to spread our message for us. And even if that sort of seeding can take a while in the real world, it can nevertheless be simulated in an exercise. So takeaway 3, information domain risks will become real-world threats if left unchecked. The diagram behind me is called the Breakout Scale, and it was designed to provide some way of measuring the effectiveness of an information campaign. The idea is that information flows from sort of one side to the other, and the further to the right it gets, the more successful the campaign. And you can see at the final stage, at the end of the scale, is a policy change or cause for violence. In the sort of corporate space, we might think of this as a blockade of a port or a mine or any kind of prevention of trade or normal business operations. Anything like that would constitute a success for the campaigners. So when we design the exercise, this can help us determine the nature and the timing of the problem escalation, starting first maybe with a single blog post or a tweet, and then having the message spread outwards across a faction before being pushed upwards and outwards via an influencer. Finally, of course, we want it to burst out from the information domain onto into the public domain, into the physical world. And in our example, we're going to start the conspiracy. We're going to start a disinformation on Reddit. It's going to spread from there onto Twitter. It's going to go on to mainstream news, and then, you know, finally there's going to be a call to action. People saying, you know, you need to get your money out. And if the banks decide to restrict withdrawals, that's only going to play into our disinformation campaign that, you know, you need to get your money out. All these calls to action and the adversarial narratives need to be combated with a variety of facts and emotion through traditional channels, through your own website, through social media, and all of that strategy, operations and tactical publishing you might want to exercise as a whole to ensure that your organisation can all work together to combat this thing. And, you know, in a highly charged and tense situation, a meme issued by the bank trying to ridicule this disinformation might not be the right thing for the bank to do, and therefore building relationships with influencers who can help you push your message, help you rebut you know, this disinformation is the right thing to do. But that's a strategy that needs to be thought through and rehearsed, and clearly exercising in a realistic environment that supports this level of detail is the right thing to do before you have to tackle it in real life. So that's how you create an exercise in the cognitive domain where, you know, we're in a war of words with an adversary intent on creating problems for us using a coordinated and sustained disinformation campaign. So to reiterate the key takeaways, number one, risk mitigation requires an understanding of the narratives that impact our organisation. Two, understanding the factions that propagate adverse narratives will help us, you know, prepare to counter them. And number three, information domain risks will become real-world threats if left unchecked. So I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. I hope you found it informative. There's a lot more information at our website, but that's all for me now, and very happy to answer questions.